Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
This is Adam.
And this is Steve.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Russian Railroads. But before we get into a description of the game, I do have some poll results today. Chris, one of our co-hosts who isn't here to defend himself today, always complains about abstract games. He hates them. He hated Samurai. He's hated pretty much every abstract game he's ever played. So I asked on Twitter how other people felt about it, and I asked people if they enjoyed abstract games. The first option was, it's my favorite type of game. Second, I don't mind abstracts. 3, I rarely like them. And number 4, I hate abstract games. Pretty sure Chris was in the 1% that chose that last option, but there wasn't too many total haters. How do you guys come out on abstract games? Steve, do you like abstract games? Do they get you excited?
The thematics of a game aren't really what brings me into it. I just like interesting mechanics. So I am a fan of abstract games, but not in particular abstract game.
Okay. So you don't mind abstracts. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I have a little trouble getting into abstract games. There has to be something there that gives me a little hook. Like Othello, and there's some other games that just have cool looking pieces, but all the Yinch, those weird games that just have like circular pieces and on like a checkerboard or a hexagonal board, it's tough for me to get excited. I'm sure they're great games. Same thing with Go. Like the pieces look cool and stuff, but they're just the pure science and mathematics and calculation. It seems like a homework exercise a lot of times more than an interesting, fun activity. I want fun in games. I don't necessarily want to do the computational exercise in it. What about you, Tim?
I answered I rarely like them because that's pretty true, I think. I don't mind playing abstracts for the most part. If somebody had a chessboard out in front of me, I'd be happy to sit down and play it. But I usually don't pick them. We had a little bit of an interesting conversation on Twitter regarding that poll. If you go on the thread there, you can see that we were kind of talking about what is an abstract game, and like the definition that I looked up and posted on the thread is a little different than what Adam posted, and he also found some examples that didn't quite match that. So I think the definition of an abstract stretching a little bit, and so some of the abstracts like Cascadia is one that I think I would call an abstract, but it has elements of luck in it, and it's got a little bit more theme added onto it, so maybe it's not a pure abstract, but like I don't mind that. I also don't mind Azul though. Like that's a fun abstract to me, but it's not a game I'm gonna pick most of the time. It's just a game that works well for the right audience, and if someone else picks it, I'm always happy to play it. So that's kind of how I feel with abstracts. Usually if someone else is picking it, I'll play it, but there aren't too many that I'm gonna go searching out gameplays of. One other thing I wanted to mention before we jump into the review, what did we just play?
Russian Railroads.
Of Russian Railroads. Yeah, thanks. If you listen to last week's episode, you'll know that we are in the process of it. We're going to change our name. We're going to rename ourselves. So we had a few ideas of names that we're kind of interested in, and we put the call out on Twitter to see what our listeners are interested, the people that follow us on Twitter, what they think is a decent name. So we're going to be kind of considering some of those results over the next week. Not going to make a call quite yet, but next week we'll probably announce what our new name is going to be, and you're going to start to see that come up on social media. But I just wanted to put it onto the episode here to let people know that's coming. So if all of a sudden you find a randomly named podcast in your subscriptions, maybe check it. I'll try to make sure it's clearly labeled that it was formerly Board Game Hot Takes. But that's coming, so you can listen to last week's episode if you didn't catch it to understand why we're doing that. All right, so let's jump into a description of Russian Railroads. In Russian Railroads, you play as Russian railroad tycoons building out some of the great Russian railways in order to gain reputation. Russian Railroads is a worker placement game where players will take turns putting workers on spots on a central board and getting the related action. The spaces will cost between 1 to 3 of your workers, and some of the actions consist of hiring an engineer, which places an extra worker placement spot in your own tableau, picking up coins, which are spent as additional workers, buying locomotives or buying factories, and several other actions, but there are 2 key action types that make up the core of the gameplay. The first is laying track. Each player has a player board with 3 tracks that represent the 3 railroads you're trying to build. You start with a black track marker at the start of each of the tracks. When you take a lay track action with one of your workers, you're moving that marker up one of the tracks a number of spaces represented on the worker placement space. Each of the tracks has a number of benefits printed on them at different points, and when your track marker hits it, then you gain the related benefit. These benefits can include extra workers, scoring bonuses, and many other things, but these will also be the way you unlock upgraded track. For example, when you move your black track marker to the second space of the Trans-Siberian Railway track, you will unlock the silver track markers that will be placed at the start of each track. Now on future track movement actions, you may be able to move the black or silver markers, but the silver marker can never move ahead of the black marker. There are 3 other levels of track as well that can be unlocked, and the main reason you want to unlock them is that the additional levels of track will score escalating points depending on the level of marker and how far along it is down the track at the end of each round. The other core actions you may take is an industrialization action, which moves your industry marker along the industry track along the bottom of your player board. It's worth more points at the end of the round based on where it is on the track. But after the 4th space on the track and every other space after that, you have to place a factory tile in the space on your player board that will allow the industry token to keep moving. And when your token lands on that factory tile, you also get a related benefit printed on the factory. After all players are out of workers, the round ends. Players will receive points for their location on the industry track, and they will also receive points based on how far up any of their upgraded track tokens are on each track up to the number of the locomotive that was purchased and placed in front of that track. Points accumulate like this each round, along with some point bonuses for getting to certain locations on each track and for some endgame scoring cards that can be collected. And then the player with the most points at the end of the game is the winner. There are a whole lot of additional mechanisms and bonuses that I didn't touch on here, but that should give you a pretty good idea on how the game plays. Russian Railroads was published by Helmut Ole and Leonard Orbler and was published by Z-Man Games. All right, so let's talk about Russian Railroads. Russian Railroads has been out for a while. I think it's a game that was printed like 10 or 12 years ago. I think it was out of print for a little while as well, but there is a brand new version that just got released, and it's in a box called Ultimate Railroads. So it's Russian Railroads as well as I think the German Railroads expansion and a new expansion called Asian Railroads. I'm not sure what else is in there, but that's my general understanding of what's in Ultimate Railroads. But we're going to talk about the kind of the base game of Russian Railroads because we got a chance to play that twice tonight. This was the first play for all 3 of us. So let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms. And Adam, what stood out to you for Russian Railroads?
This game, you're climbing up tracks, railroad tracks, essentially, and that's kind of the whole game. It doesn't try to hide it. It's just straight up in your face. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to move up these tracks and link things together and combo things up. I enjoyed it. The way the synergies between the worker placement spots to focus that conversation. You don't just move up, you're not just one guy climb up a track. You have like potentially 4 different colors of, I don't know what they were, train track, railroad tie. I don't know what they're moving up these certain tracks, and you have to move the front one before the second one can move, before the third one can move, and you kind of have to unlock these different colors of track. So if I'm going to focus it down on a specific part, I will say the novel part to me was having these different things, a kind of a follow the leader mechanism of things going up these tracks. I thought that was kind of cool and worked in an interesting kind of a way. Steve, you had some pretty neat comments on that, I thought.
I think there's a couple of really interesting factors there. One of which is, as you mentioned, you have a large pool of workers, more workers than you're going to take actions. And so you can decide, I'm going to spend more workers to take this action that might be a little bit better, but more importantly, it means that somebody else can't take it either. So there is definitely some competition in the worker placement. But my favorite part was, and you referenced Tapestry, Tim, about how there was some inspiration from that. And one of the ways I saw it really clearly was that there were multiple tracks you could go up, but each of those tracks met related objectives at slightly different times. So depending on which end game bonus cards you had and which other spaces you were trying to get to, you weren't all trying to go up the same track at the same time. You had different objectives, and it was just interesting. And the little map that we got to see on Board Game Arena was really neat because you could see where each player decided to focus their objectives. They all stopped at specific points on different tracks for specific reasons. It was interesting.
Yeah, it is one of those games where you could choose to focus on a single track, maybe a couple areas, kind of focus on one and then go a little bit on another one. And you could hit those end of track bonuses that could get a lot of points, but then you're giving up on some of the opportunities on other tracks. So it was a really tough balance all the time to be like, well, do I want to move up a few spaces there and get that extra work, or do I want to keep focusing on this one so I can hit the biggest bonuses at the end of it? So yeah, interesting choices there. I wanted to go back to the worker placement because worker placement is a very used mechanism. We've talked about it dozens of times. And I was pleasantly surprised here to feel like, even though this is an older game, it brought some of the tension that makes worker placement really good. There were a number of important spots that were available to use, and you wanted to take multiples, but you weren't going to be able to because whichever one you didn't take, someone else is going to take. And it really kept every time, everyone started with like 8 workers or something like that. So it would seem like you had a lot of things to do. But some of the spaces, as Adam mentioned, took multiple workers. So you could be giving up a lot that way. But there was also like really critical spaces to take, especially depending on your strategy. So it was just a very tense worker placement. And there's one other thing I liked about that is that there was an opportunity to pick up coins in the game, and coins could be spent as a worker. But coins also were the only way you could buy an engineer, and coins were the only way you could take a certain other worker placement spot. So coins had a different value. So you could just give them away as an extra action, which is very valuable, but then you're giving up the opportunity to use them for something else. So that was a pretty neat way to add a different level into worker placement as well.
And speaking of the coins, there was only one space on the board to get coins. There might have been there were engineer actions and factory actions, but as far as the default actions go, only one spot to get coins.
Yeah. So again, that was one more tight thing to be like, hey, if I take a different action this turn, someone else is going to pick up the only coins, which means that I won't be able to buy an engineer on the next round. So yeah, a lot of tension there in the worker placement. Now, I want to talk about the engineers a little bit because I really liked this as well. The engineers, basically, there was an engineer set up for every round of the game. So there's going to be 6 of them total in the game. One of them was available to purchase in the first round. So whoever wanted to take a worker placement spot, they could put a coin there, and then they could get this engineer, which is a permanent worker placement spot in their location. And then in a 3 or 4 player game, we played 3 players tonight. The next 2 rounds were showing face-up engineers, which are, again, unique worker placement spots. So those could be used by anyone that round, but it was a one-time thing. And then the other 3 were going to be available in later rounds, so they weren't available yet. What I really like about this, though, and I've mentioned this in other games, is I love when worker placement spaces change game to game and different ones become available. So even if you didn't get to buy one of the engineers to use in your own tableau, there was always 2 unique ones available to everyone to use. And it was just fun. It shifted up the economy a little bit. One round, hey, there's an easy way to get some tracks moved up that everyone else has been blocking off the previous rounds. It's fun. I always like that when worker placement kind of mixes up what you can do with those worker placement actions.
The engineers were super cool here, I thought. Like you said, Tim, the ability to grab one of those and have your own unique worker placement spot that no one else could use. I thought that was cool. And you had to think ahead, which I didn't realize until 3/4 of the way through the second game that, I have to save a coin in order to buy one of these engineers. Maybe I should start thinking about that. So I thought that was a neat mechanic. Another one of the tracks that wasn't a train track that you could go up was this purple industry track. And I thought that was pretty fun because it gave you all kinds of combos. Instead of buying a locomotive, you could turn it into a factory and you shift this little purple hexagon thing. Once it gets there, boom, you get a little bonus. And maybe it's a coin, like Steve said. Maybe it's you get to shift up your purple thing another time. Maybe you get to repeat a worker space out there. All these different ways you could look ahead and try to combo those together. I really tried to exploit that the second game. I had a lot of fun doing it. What do you guys think of the industry track?
It was really cool, like you said, because you can kind of create your own industry. So you can pick which bonuses, depending on the locomotives you pick that are going to go up there. So it changed what the bonuses were every time. It was also cool, though, just to have an alternate, basically, path to victory. The first game, I don't think, Steve, you didn't even create a factory the whole game, right?
No, I was intentionally trying to focus on the trains.
On the tracks themselves.
Just to see what would happen.
No, you didn't do great.
No, I did terribly.
You didn't do great, but I don't think it was just that. I think, honestly, it's probably a viable strategy if you just, understood a little bit more about where to focus on the tracks, you would have been okay. The second game, Adam completed his whole industry track and then picked up the little bonus that let him put another marker out there and complete it again, hit all those bonuses again. And he did awesome. He got a ton of points from it, but he still came in third in the game. So it's a viable strategy. You can get a lot of benefit out of it, but you can't just do that one thing. It's kind of neat that there's that completely different option to pursue.
Another thing I want to talk about are the bonuses you could pick up along the way, the little bonus circles. It kept saying achievement unlocked. You got to pick these little powerful bonus little circle tokens at various points along the track. If you're doing well, you could get up to 4 of them. And I think Steve did get all 4 maybe in his last round.
I did. I think they were called achievements.
Achievement. Thank you. That's what they're called. Achievement unlocked, it kept saying. So that felt good. It's like a video game. You get the little trophy, a little Zelda, you win the level. But these things they felt incredibly powerful, and depending on how you use them during the game, you could just combo it up again and unlock 3 other things and keep it going and going and going. So this had that very combo-y feel to it, and it was nice having Board Game Arena there to hold my hand to make sure I didn't miss anything along the way. What do you guys think of those little achievements?
They were so powerful that that's where the turns really could get long. If somebody unlocked one of those, you knew you were going to be sitting there for 10 minutes because they had to figure out, like, for example, one of them would give you 4 different track movements. And that's huge in a turn because that could trigger 2 or 3 other bonuses that were going to happen. Or you could get 5 of the factory movements and that could trigger several bonuses. It was really cool. They were big effects, gave you a big turn every once in a while, a big turn full of combos. Like, Adam, one of your turns, I think you ended up going up, like, picking one and then going up the factory track and triggering like three factories, which triggered another one of those, and then you got some other bonus. Like, it's really cool when all that stuff comes together and triggers, and it gives a little variety to the game. You only can use one of them each time you activate one, and so you can kind of pick the one that's going to work best for your strategy at that time. And then one of them gave you a special bonus that only one person per turn could get. I don't remember what they were called, but they were like, there's 4 cards at the bottom of the game that you could choose from, bottom of the board.
And get the end game bonuses.
No, not those, but like you got the one token that gave you the 1 engine building benefit and then 1 end game bonus card at the same time. So that was some fun decisions too. And the end game scoring things, I think those ones actually are shuffled and there's only a few available each game. So yeah. Those are going to change every time.
Right. They were different from game to game. Yep.
Right. And so you don't know what you're going to get, when you go to those, like you can't plan for them. You just have to go for them. But yeah, those were fun. It was a cool mechanism. The one other thing I think is kind of neat here is the mix of like moving your tracks up, but then also having to have engine cards because your tracks didn't score unless you had an engine that matched the number on it. So I don't want to go into too much detail here, not even in the rules description. We didn't go into too much detail on this because it's a little bit of a complicated rule to explain, but it was pretty neat that you had to have kind of a threshold. You had to have a locomotive large enough so that you could score your tracks high enough up the track. A lot of fun little things to watch for in layers. After we played it wasn't really that complicated of a game. The rule set was pretty simple. Quick turns, like we were taking turns in 15 seconds, unless Steve forgot that it was his turn. But really quick and streamlined to play. And we played the first game in an hour and a half, and we played the second game in an hour. It was cool that it was so easy, but had a lot of fun, tough decisions to make.
Yeah, agreed. Now, this game was published back in 2013. And Tim, you mentioned that some games were influenced by this. I think you said, was Tapestry one of the games that was kind of influenced by this?
I mean, Jamie Stegmaier read an article that he said that this would influence him to one extent. It was the kind of the escalating scoring that happens at the end of the rounds. So that, and you can see that link there. But I suspect also to some extent that just the tracks, the kind of the track movements in Tapestry where you're just moving up and getting bonuses at different point. There's a link there as well. I don't know if that's what drove this one.
This game just, I don't know, had a feeling, like I've played games post 2013 that felt like a lot of stuff came from this game. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but it did have that kind of familiar feeling to me, like, oh, I recognize some of the mechanics here. Did any of the mechanics here seem a novel to you? Or is there anything you hadn't seen before? Anything that seemed new or different that hasn't been done since?
Well, the way that the tracks that you had to get the kind of the locomotives to meet the threshold to move up those tracks was probably the thing that felt the strangest to me as I was reading the rules and trying to understand how it's going to play. But otherwise, not really. I think a lot of stuff has been done either before or since this game. But I think it did some things really well. It was a very tense game for worker placement. I think it did worker placement in a really good way.
Steve, anything that felt different, unique to you?
It was actually a double threshold, right? Because in order to move your scoring units further up the tracks, you needed to have moved the previous iteration of that token. So you have to move the track tokens in order, but on top of that, as Tim mentioned, to hit other components, including scoring for those tracks, your engine also has to meet those same spots. So it's interesting trying to balance moving multiple things in some sequence to be able to achieve the bonuses and scores.
Yes, I guess the one thing that does seem very novel to me was having to move the black track up out of the way first before you can move your gray track, then followed by your copper track or your brown track, and then followed by your natural. You kind of had to work those things up in order to get more scoring from the other tracks subsequently along the way. So that would seem kind of different to me.
I mean, clearly we're novices, but we played twice and no one even came close to getting any of those super high scoring track tokens on the board.
Right. The final level. Right.
Not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah, that's because you have to get the end of the Trans-Siberian track to even get those. And so that's just pushing your black token a lot of spaces, that you're going to use a lot, but maybe it pays off. I don't know. I think there's definitely some areas to explore. We played twice. We did significantly better on the second game than we did on the first. Everybody did.
All three of us. Yeah.
All three of us did. And I think we all explored somewhat different strategies. Adam's like, no, I did the exact same thing.
Well, you know, I explored the same one in hopes that I could do it better. And I did. I did it much better, which felt good.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, why don't we talk about the theme and production of this game? First of all, the theme is non-existent. They put a railroad theme on it, but nothing really makes sense here. Why are you pushing one track up before you push the next color track up? And just none of it actually works. So you can pretty much ignore the theme from my perspective. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think the theme made sense here?
I was not a fan of the theme integration at all. It was very clumsy and it was just arbitrary. It didn't matter.
Totally arbitrary. There was names of cities in Russia or the Ukraine, and that was about as thematic as it got for me. Nothing that mattered at all about location or Russia itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally arbitrary theme. Production wise, it's standard fare for a Euro, nothing fancy. At least it's not all shades of brown. There is some Soviet red in there, which I like, the kind of color scheme and the different little, it's like an I-beam cross section that you're moving up, perhaps a railroad track cross section that you're moving up these tracks in the various metals or different colors. So those look kind of fun to handle, a little bit different shape than is in any kind of game that I've seen. And then what else? You got your typical little worker dudes that you're putting out there. So from a production standpoint, nothing spectacular, but nothing horrible, nothing too off-putting for me either.
Yeah, I'm looking at the pictures of it in the rulebook right now, and from 2013, I think this was actually probably a little bit exceptional in that there was actually some color and some, kind of unique artwork on the board, including the wrench that Steve hated down at the bottom of the board. At least it wasn't just bland grays and browns. And so it kind of stepped it up a little bit there, but I don't think it stands out today. I'm curious. I haven't looked at the Ultimate Railroads box yet. I don't know if that changes anything, but it probably doesn't need to. I think this does okay. It's just, doesn't stand out that much today, but it's just fine.
The design of the player boards were pretty functional. Like everything was pretty easy to see and understand what was going on, and there was enough space to put your pieces. Like I hate that when you're crowding your worker placement spaces. Mechanically, the design worked pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was the coolest to me was the way that the factories worked, kind of the automation track or whatever, how you had to kind of plug in these factories at the bottom and they slotted into the bottom of your player board. And they had to be there in order to create an extra space where you could continue moving your automation track through that row. So that's a fun little tactile piece of the puzzle. But also just like on the player board, there's all these little areas where you can see little dotted lines where something can plug in there. And you have to hit certain bonuses or get certain awards before you can put them on the board. Yeah, it's kind of fun how it's like a little modular player board and you're building up your little, whatever it is, not a railroad, but whatever it is you're building up here.
Not to steal your thunder, Tim, you always are the UI, the user interface guy, but the interface here is very, very clean. And they did add little flourishes of Russian knickknacks and this and that on the board too, to kind of bring you in and integrate. It's not bland. I enjoyed the little items that they put there on the board to kind of bring you in.
Yeah, and I don't think we really even had to look at the rulebook once, right? I mean, all the cards and iconography was pretty straightforward.
Nope.
Well, I guess we did use Board Game Arena
Not
as a
one
little
time.
tooltip, so I might have moused over a couple and to understand what they did, but
Sure,
it definitely
sure,
didn't seem
yeah.
very confusing. Everything seemed pretty clear to me.
Super clean.
The tooltips were helpful. I would have had to look at the rule book without the tooltips, probably.
Yeah, and that's probably worth bringing up one more thing about this game. And we played on Board Game Arena, so hey, we got the tooltips. We also didn't have to do all the end round scoring.
Yes.
This game is played over 6 rounds, and I bet playing this in person this scoring would be a complete pain in the butt in between each round. Because you can kind of think like I was playing Cascadia the other day, and the one thing I don't like about that game is the end game scoring takes about 10 minutes to get through, like scoring up everybody's different wildlife and everybody's different scoring conditions. You would have to do that pretty much the same thing every round here. 6 rounds, of course, with the last one being the biggest scoring round and taking the most to calculate. So I would bet that that's a total pain in the butt in person. So glad that BGA did that for us.
Agreed. I think it was so very wrong about games just talked about Russian railroads, and they were saying how they much prefer to play it on board game arena, and I agree. Just because the scoring is all handled right there. We got through 2 games in I don't know 2.5 hours, and we could probably get through it quicker if we played it again. So thank you for taking care of all the bookkeeping work. Board game arena, that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about memorable moments. Anything that stood out to you here, Steve?
Being utterly shocked that I won the second game because I kind of forgot about the end game bonus cards, and that's where a lot of my points came from at the end that I wasn't expecting. So that was a nice surprise for sure.
You shocked us all.
Yes, including myself.
I was absolutely sure I had this one in the bag. I had like 91 points that were going to be added to my score, and I was in the lead by I don't know 10 points, which is not much in this game, I guess. And I had a little bit of in-game scoring, and I was like, ha ha ha! I was getting a little overconfident, and then after the game ended, I heard the little wah 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 sound from Board Game Arena. I was like, what? And I saw that Steve had won like by a pretty hefty margin in the end too, which I was just like, holy cow. So that was pretty exciting to me. A couple of the turns I had were pretty fun too. I got to use this repeater guy. I had like 2 repeaters on my factory track, my industrial track. And then I took one little action, let me repeat this other action like 3 times. I got to keep going up that factory track to repeat some more and more and more. So that was kind of fun comboing those all together. If that makes any sense to anybody, I explained that horribly.
It makes sense to me. Yeah.
It
makes sense. To
okay,
me.
Great. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, well, I think that's it, right? The big moments here is when you can pick up one of those advantage tokens and then trigger, some other bonus and move up another track and then trigger another bonus, and you can get these really big turns, and that's just fun. And I think we all had some of those. I think Adam had the biggest turn of all, doing, like the one he was just mentioning. I think actually my favorite moments was some of the worker placement tension, because like I remember, I think it was the 5th round or so, and I really needed another factory and another train. So I was going to take the one spot that let you do both of those things. Adam went first, I think, and he actually took that when he should have taken, like, normally you'd want to take the 2 coins because it was like 2 extra workers or the 2 worker spots. There's several other spaces that are very valuable, and I was like, that's totally going to be available to me. And then, of course, Adam grabs it. And then it comes back around to him, and I go right before him, and I take the 2 coins. It's like, Tim, you jerk. So it's just like this constant, like, right, you got it there right before I did all the time. And I love when worker placement does that. There's a lot of worker placement, and like we mentioned a Feast for Odin during this game because there's a lot of different worker placement spaces here. But where this game has a lot of options, but they're tense because some of the spaces are only useful at the beginning of the game, like the black and silver track movements. Everybody wants to take those, for example. And then some of them only become useful as multiple people unlock some of the other track types. So even though there's a lot of spaces, they're not all valuable all the time. And I was going to say, as opposed to a Feast for Odin, where there's so many spaces that there's virtually no tension at all in that game. It doesn't make it a bad game. The game does some really cool things and different things, but I like worker placement when it has that tension. And it's like, I have to make a very tough choice here because I know if I take this thing, I'm going to give up this other thing. And this did it in a really cool way. Let's talk about our final question of the night, and that is, would you request to play this again? Adam, what about you?
I don't know if I would request. I don't think I would request to play it again, but I would be totally happy playing this game on Board Game Arena anytime. It's breezy, it's fun, it's quick, you're clicking through stuff, doing these combos that feel good. So that's where I sit with Russian railroads. What about you, Steve?
I would request to play this again. I think I'm going to try to get some of my less board gamey people to try it out on Board Game Arena. Sort of like a much fancier Rajas dice, right? It's going to be a nice entry weight game for some people that I would like to introduce online board games to.
I wouldn't consider this an entry weight game at all. You introduce somebody who's just getting into board gaming?
Just getting into online board gaming because the interface on Board Game Arena, once you're played through it a couple times, I think is pretty nice compared to like Tabletop Simulator or some of the other platforms. Like some of these same people do and have played on Yukata before, but this is kind of in between in the online board gaming. Like you have some controlled, you're not just clicking the next button, but you don't have to deal with the physics and stuff from Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, well, it's definitely true. So I wanted to play German Railroads. We tried to play it tonight, but the BGA didn't have an implementation for it. And so I think this would start to feel a little stale fairly quickly. There are a lot of choices and a few different directions you can go down, but I could see it kind of feeling after a few games like, okay, everyone's always going for this action, then always going for this action. I'd really like to try German Railroads, which looks like it adds new player boards and allows you to kind of build out the track bonuses. So in other words, instead of just having the same bonuses every time you move up a track, you get to kind of set that. And so that's going to vary. And I think that would really freshen the game up and make it different decision points every time you played it. So I will be looking to try to play German Railroads and see how that feels. I think this is a really fun game, but I probably wouldn't just go back to Russian Railroads. Like, I don't think I would buy this game because I don't think I'd choose to play it over a lot of other more modern Euros. I think it did some really cool things. It was fun to play, and it's like Adam said, I would play it on Board Game Arena anytime. Yeah, that's how I sit with it. It's a great game. I'd like to see how the German expansion improves on it, gives it some variability, but really fun. I'm glad I had a chance to play it.
No, I agree, Tim. I'm trying to think of something that would fit this niche, in lieu of Russian Railroads. What would be a little more satisfying to play than this game?
I think this kind of falls in with we talked about Concordia, we talked about Rococo, right? These are games from the same era, and there's just something about it that is just a little bit too light in a way. Like, it's not light. It's a fairly heavy game, but they don't feel like there's enough things to think about. Once you've played it a couple times, they start to feel like you're doing the same actions over and over again. And I think that's kind of the feeling I was getting here versus a more modern game. Dune Imperium or Lost Ruins of Arnak are great examples, right? They've kind of added in so much variability in that every time you've got a different row of cards to draw from. I just played Bonfire by Stefan Feld this week, which is a modern Euro, probably about the same weight. And the variability in there is crazy. It's like the bonuses and what you can actually do in the game change every time. And I don't know, I think there's just something about that in more modern games that adds a little bit more layers to it. This was really fun. I just don't see this being something I'd be going back to every month and finding that it's staying fresh for me. And I think that's what some of these other newer games are bringing.
And Steve, as far as the combo-ness of this, would you introduce this to one of your non-gamery friends over like Dice Charmer, Raja the Ganji's Dice Charmers, which you name dropped earlier?
They're different audiences. Raja's the Dice Charmers is way more fun in terms of comboiness. There are some similarity here with the tracks.
Okay.
I would say that the track comboiness is more like Tapestry than it is like Raja's to me. In terms of online complexity for a new online gamer, Rajas is also way easier.
Okay.
I think this game has more interesting complexities than Rajas does. So Rajas is super fun. It's easier. This is more interesting in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, they're kind of apples and oranges. Aside from having some combos you can trigger off, they don't really feel like the same game at all. I wouldn't say one's going to fire the other one. That'll wrap up our conversation on Russian Railroads. We're going to talk about some games that have been on our table and some future takes right after this. All right, welcome back. So let's talk about a couple games that have been on our table lately. Adam, what have you been playing?
I played a game called Royal Visit. This is designed by Rainer Knizia, and this version is published by Yellow Games. This is considered an abstract game, like we were talking about earlier. So you have this cloth playmat on the left side. It's a 2-player game only, so I played this one with Sarah a couple times. On the left side is like the green guys area. On the right side is the red area. You're trying to convince the king to come to your chateau or hang out in your duchy, by playing these different cards. There's a deck of like, I don't know if it's like 52 cards, a deck of 50 or so cards. You have 8 in your hand at a time. You're playing a card out. It either moves there's a jester, there is a wizard, there is a king, and he's surrounded at all times by 2 guards. And you're playing a card or cards that represent one of those characters, and then you're just moving them on this linear cloth mat towards your chateau. At the end of your turn, if you have people in your chateau, you get to pull this little token towards your side. If you get that token towards all the way in your chateau, you win the game. If nobody has won the game by the time you go through the deck twice, then whichever side the king is in, they win the game. So it's, you're kind of going back and forth, has this tug of war feel to it. You're trying to outwit your opponent. I don't know. I thought it was very okay. And that's kind of my conclusion on this. It was about a $20 game. I had a couple hours playing it. So there was 2 of us. If you want to do the math on that, we got 2 hours worth of playing a fun game. So that's, $20, 2 people, 2 hours. That's like $5 an hour. That's worth it to me. Have you guys heard of this game? Have any interest in playing it? Have you guys looked at it?
I haven't heard of it. I'm just looking at it right now. I see it's from 2006, but the production that is up on Board Game Geek looks much more modern than that, and I don't think Yellow's been around that long. So was this like an updated version that came out?
This is a reprint. It's been getting a lot of buzz. Shut Up and Sit Down had a little piece on it, and a few other reviewers have been talking about it, so I thought I'd give it a try. And yeah, the new production is outstanding. You got these, like I talked about, the guard and the king and the wizard and the jester. They're these thick, chunky wooden little characters that you're moving around on this silky smooth cloth kind of map. And the colors are beautiful. The cards are beautiful. So there's a lot of appeal there in the production, the artwork, and the colorful. It's just very, very nice, very slick.
It looks nice. It doesn't sound fun at all.
Yeah, it was okay. It was fun to explore. Like I said, 2 hours, $5 an hour for 2 people to hang out and converse over some different mechanics, a different game. I got my money's worth.
You know who would love this Reiner Knizia masterpiece? I bet.
Chris.
Yeah,
I should give this game to Chris.
All right. Steve, have you been playing anything?
Yeah. After playing in TimCon, Seven Wonders Duel, I picked that up this week at a local board game shop, as well as Shamans, which we played at TimCon. Got to play both of those this week and enjoyed both of those purchases thoroughly. And then also purchased the Patchwork Halloween edition. I had a good time playing that as well.
So tell us what is unique about Patchwork Halloween edition. What does it change from the original Patchwork?
The thematics are different. So instead of buttons, you have scary eyeballs that you have to collect for points, and there are bats and cauldrons and other kinds of things on the pieces. The player boards are green and purple, which is Halloween colors. Just some stuff like that. But in addition to the thematic changes, they had also rebalanced quite a few of the patchwork tiles from the original game. They feel that this edition is more balanced for playing, and we had a good time with it.
Interesting. If you don't know how Patchwork plays, it's one of these games where basically you take your token and you move it up a track, and then whoever's in the back gets to move next. And in this particular game, you're essentially buying pieces that are around the board. If you buy a piece that's more expensive, you're going to use more time, and that means the other person can buy multiple pieces behind it. So it's one of those like Glenmore type of mechanisms, or Parks.
Aussie Australia.
Yeah, it sounds like a cute implementation of it.
Tim, what have you been playing?
I want to talk about Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. We're big fans of Terraforming Mars. I'm not going to go into all the mechanisms of that game, but Jacob Friselius and Stronghold Games, who were the creators for the original Terraforming Mars, they put out a new version called Ares Expedition, which is supposed to be kind of a streamlined, lighter version. And it's actually out in big box stores. You can go to Target and pick this up right now. What it does a little bit differently is that instead of drafting cards and then players taking turns, taking their actions or playing cards like you do in the base Terraforming Mars, this one uses a race for the galaxy mechanism. Everybody picks an action they want to take, and if you pick that action, you get an extra bonus on it, and you're hoping in every round that other people pick different actions than you, because then you get to do the action that you picked, but you also get to do the actions that other people picked. So for example, if you know Terraforming Mars, these will sound kind of familiar to you, but like one of the actions you can pick is to develop, which allows you to play a green card. Those are production cards. Construction allows you to play a blue card, which are going to be kind of the repeating action cards you can take, or a red card, which is a one-time event card. An action, so this is the third type of card, action is how you actually activate your blue card. So unless somebody plays the action card in that round, you can't activate your other blue buildings. Production is what actually does production, so it's going to trigger all your production buildings and give you those resources. And then research is how you get cards here. So instead of just getting cards at the beginning of a round, you have to take a research action, which lets you draw 3 cards and keep 2 of them. So again, in one round, if you're playing a 4-player game, you could end up getting to do 4 of those things, and everybody just kind of does it simultaneously. The other thing that really changes here is it kind of removes all of the board interplay. There's no central board where you're building buildings or building forests or things like that. The only thing that this board does is it has a score tracker and the temperature and the oxygen trackers. It has 9 ocean tiles on it. And so if you ever take an action that creates an ocean, you just flip one of those tiles over and you get whatever random benefits printed on it. So there's a little bit of a bonus for doing that. But just like in regular Terraforming Mars, the game ends when those 3 conditions have met: 9 oceans, 9% oxygen, and 6 degrees. I don't know what but the same 3 thresholds essentially.
8 degrees. Yeah.
So I was kind of excited about this for a couple of reasons. One, because it claimed to be like a lighter version of Terraforming Mars. And, I have a couple friends that I play with regularly that this seemed like it'd be a better weight for them. They don't have any interest in getting into Terraforming Mars, I don't think. And so I thought maybe I'll be able to teach this. The other reason I picked it up, though, is because I've never really liked the solo mode for Terraforming Mars, because I didn't like that you're just trying to beat these thresholds within a certain time frame. And so there are a lot of cards you just had to ignore in the solo mode because you have to be focusing on the things that push those thresholds up. So I thought I'd try this out. It's like $40 at Target. Picked it up. I've played 4 solo games of it. I've been saving it for a while to talk about because I'd intended to try to get some multiplayer games in, but I really don't want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about it now and then move it out of my collection because I don't really have any interest in playing this game again. Now, I don't think it's a bad game. I think it does some of the things that Terraforming Mars does, a little bit of tableau building. But I think it removes some of the magic that Terraforming Mars has. There is no tension between the players at all. Some of my favorite parts of that game is when you're racing to hit one of those, it's the awards?
The awards and the milestones, yeah.
The milestones, right? The milestones. You're always racing to try to get to one of those before someone else does. And so you got to time your actions just perfectly. You're trying to get out on the board at the right place. Drop a meteor right next to somebody else's city so they can't place a building there. Those are so many fun elements of that game, and that's completely removed here. Now, again, I only played solo, but I don't see how you'd really feel like you were interacting at all with the other players here. And that's fine. It's a multiplayer solitaire game is okay. But in this case, I just don't have any interest in playing this over Terraforming Mars. And I think even thinking about what if I wanted to play with some friends that wanted a lighter game? This isn't the game I'd pick. I'd rather pick a different game of this weight than this. They're just, too many other good games. So I think people are going to discover this that don't know Terraforming Mars and have some real fun with it and discover like a new type of gameplay. And it does have some of the things that Terraforming Mars likes. For me, it just doesn't do anything that makes me want to play this over the original Terraforming Mars. And it doesn't do anything well enough to make me want to play it over other similar games of the same weight. So that's my take on it. I'm not going to keep it. I think if you have and like Terraforming Mars, I wouldn't waste your time with it. I know that's not going to be true for everybody. Some people might prefer it, but personally, I wouldn't bother with it. If you don't have Terraforming Mars and you've been interested in checking it out, just check out Terraforming Mars. I don't think you need to take this step here, to be honest, because it doesn't remove enough complexity to really make it that much more entry weight. And it does, I think, remove some of the fun of it.
So how long does this game take to play?
I can't judge that too well because I only played solo, and solo is very quick. I could knock out a solo game in about 30 minutes. And one of the advantages is that it's very quick to set up too. It takes about 30 seconds to set this game up. Okay. But I think it would probably, depending on the players, not shorten the game that much. Because, if you think about it, when everybody takes a round, there might be 3 or 4 different actions they're going to take, and then they just do their thing by themselves. And you can imagine an awful lot of players that are going to be trying to figure out, do I play this card now because it's going to trigger off the production? And I just don't see how it's going to speed up the game that much. It may a little bit, but I just don't see how it would speed it up that much.
And then do you see any kind of player interaction coming from this? Because that is one of my favorite parts of Terraforming Mars base game, the non-Ares expansion. Because, you got that interaction on the map, the race of the tracks and the milestones and this and that.
The only interaction I can think of here, I don't think there are any cards that interact or anything like that, but the only interaction you will have is trying to guess which action the other players are going to take. So there's a little bit of that saying I really need a production, but I don't want to do the production if somebody else is doing it. So I'm going to take a bet
Okay.
that I'm going to take this other action and hope that somebody else plays the production. I don't think it's up enough of a payoff, to be honest, to make it fun. So
Okay.
yeah, this was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but I think some people will have fun with it.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about some games that are coming up in the future that we're keeping our eyes on. Adam, anything that you've been watching out for here?
I've had my eye on, believe it or not, it's a Space 4X game on Kickstarter right now. Stop me if you've heard this before. This one is called Age of Galaxy. This one is by designer is Jeffrey CCH is what it says on Board Game Geek, and the artist is Samuel Horowitz. Publisher is Ice Makes. So a bunch of people that aren't big names in the board game industry. The appeal of this game to me is that it is very tiny. On Kickstarter, it claims that it's 15 centimeters by 10 centimeters. These guys are out of Canada, so translating that to American, that means 6 inches by 4 inches. And it claims to be pocket size. That's a pretty big pocket, but it claims to be pocket size. It's a game that's very portable. It says it plays about 45 minutes, and it's supposed to be like a 4X game. John Gets Games has a little playthrough video of this. I watched it. It looks fairly entertaining to me. It has a little bit of this, almost like a little Gaia project track at the top for how much income you're gonna produce, and you can use that each round. It has all these different factions, 40 different factions or so. And are they really factions? Kinda. What that means, they're just cards here in this game. And throughout the course of the game, there's going to be 4 or 5 rounds. You can play these factions. You were dealt 7 at the beginning of the game. You get to use 3 of them as your quote unquote factions. They're just cards. You put them out there, and they give you little bonuses and stuff and kind of guide your strategy. And then the other 4 you discard at whatever times to help you out for other little bonuses. So it's this little hand management kind of aspect of the game too. So it looks really interesting. It's not just novel that it's in a tiny box. The game actually looks pretty neat. Each round, you're flipping this new sector of the galaxy over. And if you have a technology that lets you get out there and colonize, you can get out there ahead of the rest of the players and colonize a planet that they might not be able to reach yet. You can always colonize planets that are in your sector as long as you have the capability to be able to colonize that. So a lot of the things that you'll find in 4X games that's kind of condensed down and presented in a different way with some nice art in a very teeny tiny, very portable box. Have you guys checked the Kickstarter on this yet? Taking a look? Any thoughts?
No, I haven't looked at it. I was just looking at some pictures on Board Game Geek, though, and it looks clever. It looks like it's like a Tiny Epic Galaxies size box. Have you ever seen any of the Tiny Epic games?
No, I assume they're tiny. I don't know about the Epic part.
I had a chance to play Tiny Epic Galaxies several years back. It was pretty fun, but this looks good. I assume the cost is pretty low. What's that?
So there's a couple tier levels for Age of Galaxy. The general pledge is $29, and then the deluxe pledge is $42. So
what does a deluxe pledge get you that's different?
it gets you another box full of minis, all stretch goals, and a deluxe upgrade box. So just another box that looks like there's just a bunch of minis in there. Let me see what else is in there.
Now you need 2 pockets.
No, that actually makes sense. So the base game doesn't have minis. It has just like...
Oh, it does.
Oh, it does.
No,
okay.
it has a bunch of like minis. They're all the same
okay.
mold though. And the deluxe one, there are different molds. And it looks like fancier cubes.
Okay.
And some nicer organizers.
Cool. Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
$30 to $45 is more reasonable, especially.
Still reasonable, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, good luck. I hope it's fun. How many other 4X games have you backed and then pulled out of this month?
Oh, it's been a backing and pulling out of festival in the last 30 or 40 days.
Well, keep us updated if you make it through this one all the way and actually get to the end of the campaign.
I will do that.
When does the campaign end on this one?
Let's take a look. There are 11 days to go, so that would mean the 19th, November 19th, this game is done with Kickstarter.
So when this releases, people have 4 or 5 days still to back it. Looks interesting, so let us know how it goes. They actually have a 2021 release date on here on Board Game Geek. We all know that's nonsense, so sometime next year, I assume you'll get it.
Yeah, we'll see. Tim, what have you been looking at? Anything?
Just one thing I want to talk about that I'm pretty excited about. Stonemaier Games is releasing the newest expansion for Tapestry. We talked about Tapestry a decent amount, but this is called the Arts and Architecture expansion. And as they always do, about a month before you can pre-release the game, they kind of release a little bit of information every day. So we've been getting little tidbits every day this week. And just a couple quick elements about the expansion that look fun to me. There is a whole new track, the arts track, a purple one that's basically you just set it next to the board so you have another alternative to go after. And there are 3 new landmarks on that track, of course. The gist of this is that at certain spaces on the track, one of the benefits you can get are these little works of art. And essentially, there are these little cards that go over by your player mat and they trigger during income. So one of the things that I never really liked about Tapestry is that the income phase feels redundant. Every time you do it, you're getting the same couple resources, the same point scoring benefits, and that's all that happens. This one is going to now give you new variable bonuses because the works of art that come up are going to be like 3s available at any time. So when somebody buys one, then a new one comes up. So you're going to get just like a different variety of essentially income benefits that you're going to get. So that's one of the benefits you get on the track. There's a few other things. The track looks fun to play and entertaining. There's also, you can get generic income buildings, meaning that it basically, when you get the bonus, instead of just taking a specific income building, you can take any of them. Which to me, sometimes I feel frustrated that I'll get up to a track and I'll have skipped over 1 or 2 of the income buildings and then I can't get to the top bonuses there. So this looks like it'll let you kind of fill out your income tracks in certain areas. A few other things, but the one other thing I think I'm really excited about with this is that they've got a whole new set of capital city mats. In the base game, there's the 6 capital city mats and they all have slightly different layouts, but they all work exactly the same way. But with this new expansion, the capital city mats are very different. They actually have different mechanisms on it. So like one of them is the swamp, and the swamp has little areas that have water areas that would normally be red dots on it, but these just have little lily pad icons on it. And so they count as covered up so that you can fill it in with buildings around that area and then get the bonus for it. At the end of the game, you'll lose 2 points for every lily pad showing. So you might want to get the early bonuses by filling up that region, but then you still want to try to cover up that lily pad later so you don't get the negative points for it. Every one of the capital city mats, they have spoiled 2 of them so far, and every one of those mats plays completely different, has a very unique layout. Just, it looks fun. It looks like it'll add some really fresh variety to the game. There's a whole bunch of new Tapestry cards in the game that look like they do some fun new things. And then a new way to actually replace your income mats as well. Like I think it's at the end of the arts track where you can get a little replacement income mat that goes up and gives you new income benefits as you remove the building. So seems like it's going to really flesh out, add a lot of variety and change up the game quite a bit in some ways I think it could use. So
Is this the 3rd expansion?
Second. It's the second expansion. Yeah.
And Steve, how are you feeling about Tapestry these days?
Yes, I had a terrible game last time I played it, but it is still in my collection. And this expansion sounds like it would be a good match for the game. Looking forward to seeing it.
All right, cool. That'll wrap up our episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you have any questions or want to chat with us on social media, you can find us wherever you find social media with Board Game Hot Takes. We will be changing our name soon, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, though, so we'll be keeping you all updated on that. Hopefully next week we'll have a big announcement on that. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.